Governments helped develop economies and rapid industrialize by using 5-year plans that relied on tight control and would have negative effects on the lower class. For example, Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward was a failure where he hoped it would industrialize China, but it hurt the economy and starved people. Governments had little to no involvement in their national economies, but that was changed after the Great Depression. In the following presentation, there will be a series of leaders who contributed to the economy's policies and promoted economic liberalization through the United States, Britain, China, and Chile.
In the Soviet Union, the government led the country through a series of 5-year plans, starting in the 1920s and ending in 1991. Stalin led the first 5, which were the most effective. The first quadrupled workers in labor jobs, such as industry, construction, and transportation. But the shift from agrarian to industrial at a rapid pace led to ripples that lowered the food supply, and that led to a famine that killed hundreds of thousands of people. The second was slightly less successful, and the third was interrupted by the Great War, which led to a lot of damage, such as here in St. Petersburg. This led the fourth and the fifth to rebuild the Soviet Union using reparations from Germany. So the Soviet Union became economically rich, flaunting success that intellectuals and ideologues in China found really attractive, and so therefore they tried to use it. The People's Republic of China, led by Mao Zedong, implemented in the 50s. They tried to match the Soviet Union. Despite the first plan lowering income by 13% and the ensuing public outcry that came from that event, the Republic continued and was able to raise profits by 35% in the next plan. This continued to the recent day, with the 13th being implemented in this current year. So essentially, the control that communist countries exerted over their constituents and the way that they industrialized so quickly and effectively led to government invulnerability from the Great Depression.
The massive event, known as the Great Leap Forward, was Mao Zedong's attempt to rapidly industrialize China's mainly agrarian society. Some of the effects of this was a famine and a drop in Chinese agricultural production. 20 million people died due to a series of natural disasters and poor harvests. As many may wonder, what led Mao to choose such a method of industrialization? Unlike Russia, China consumed most of its agricultural products, making it difficult to raise funds for machinery. As a result, Mao aimed to both industrialize and feed China simultaneously with the same amount of labor that had previously been enough to sate Chinese hunger and create a small surplus. Not only that, the quota for production put pressure on the leaders of communes of 20 to 40 families, leading to falsification of records, causing distributed food to be less than what could sustain a family. The method of close planting also caused a larger food shortage due to the point that closely packed plants lack nutrition. This is why, all in all, the Great Leap Forward was a failure.
Gamal Abdel Nasser was an Egyptian army officer, prime minister, and then president of Egypt. The Egyptian economy was dominated by a private capital until the revolution of 1952, which replaced the monarchy with the republic. A new government that Nasser promoted began to reorganize the economy along the socialist lines in late 1950s. The state played an increasingly role in the economic development through its management of the agricultural sector after the land reforms in 1952 and 1961. These reforms limited the amount of land an individual or family could own. In the early 1960s, the government nationalized much of its industrial, financial, and commercial sectors of the economy. Egyptian industry progressed during Nasser's rule. Encouragement of the export-oriented industrialization of the sort has occurred in the successful countries of East Asia and is unlikely to be replicated in other developing countries, particularly in Africa and Latin America, which have much lower ratios of skill to land or of human to natural resources.
There were a series of leaders who propelled free trade nations such as the US, Britain, China, and Chile. One of these leaders was Ronald Reagan, who changed the US's economy with his twin policy beliefs of deregulation and free market trade, which initiated a series of measures to ensure increased opportunities to sell American-made goods and services overseas. Some of the greatest achievements was America's first free trade agreement with Israel in 1985, the Uruguay Round in 1986, and the industrial booms of 1980s that were created by tax cuts. Another leader who influenced free trade in their nation was Margaret Thatcher. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher changed Britain's economy when she went to make her Bruges speech, announcing that free trade was for peace, politics, and freedom. She has forever influenced Europe's views on free trade by declaring that it reinforced nations' mutual understanding and dispersing the power to the customers instead of the state.
Augusto Pinochet was Chile's dictator in 1973 to 1990. The government was suppressed for many reasons, but it had an economic policy of free market through Chicago Boys. El Ladillo, the economic model, had three main objectives: economic liberalization, privatization of state-owned companies, and stabilization of inflation. Deng Xiaoping, leader of the People's Republic of China from 1978 to 1989, had economic policies known as 改革开放 that were far-reaching and had two stages. The first included decollectivization of agriculture, opening of China to foreign investment, especially evident with purchase of machinery from Japan and the West. In fact, in 1980, Deng attracted foreign companies to the special economic zone for foreign investment and the giving of investors tax concessions for revenue and technical knowledge.
Corporatism is the theory and practice of organizing workers and employers into corporations subordinate to the state. The corporate state was put into effect in fascist Italy between World War I and World War II, reflecting the will of the country's dictator, Benito Mussolini, towards nationalism. The system was eventually broken by the onset of World War II. After the war, the governments of many democratic Western European countries like Austria, Norway, and Sweden developed strong corporatalist elements in an attempt to mediate and reduce conflict between businesses and trade unions. The New Deal is the domestic program of the administration of U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt during the Great Depression, which brought immediate economic relief and reforms in industry, agriculture, finance, water power, labor, and housing. In this time, banks were in crisis. Nearly a quarter of the workforce was unemployed, and wages and production declined significantly. The New Deal embraced the concept of a government-regulated economy, improving the lives of people suffering from the Depression and restoring faith in American democracy.
Thanks to the leaders of these nations, economic reform took place throughout the world, especially through the United States, Britain, China, and Chile. In the Soviet Union and Republic of China, they were able to make up for their late industrialization by using tight control through their 5-year plans. In contrast, Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward was a failure that killed millions and did not succeed in industrializing China. After the Great Depression, governments became involved in the economies to prevent from happening to them. Like Nizar, who replaced monarchy with republic, reorganizing his economy.